Hi, I'm Paul Stringfellow, and welcome to another Tech Takeaways. So on this week's show, I'm joined by two new guests, one new guest, one new host. And I know you'll recognise one of the hosts, but it's been such a long time since I've been sat next to him that I feel I should reintroduce him. So I'm joined by my, to pinch Jason's phrase, dynamic co-host, Wayne Miller. Hi, Wayne.
Hi, everybody. Good to be back, Paul. Thank you.
Nice to have you back. I just wanted to remind everybody that, you've left me doing this on my own. But this time...
You love it.
Oh, well, yeah. But this time we've been Jason off. So we're going to do a few episodes about Jason. We've decided to send him to podcast school to learn how to do podcasts again for the future. So that'll be good. He'll be new and improved when he returns. But on this week's show, we're going to be talking about a topic that probably doesn't get talked about enough, I think, but is an important part of an organisation's cybersecurity posture, and that's penetration testing, so pen testing. So we're going to be talking about that. And joining us to talk about that is a new member of the Gardner Systems team. It's Keelan. Hi, Keelan.
Very nice to meet you. How are you?
You have met us before.
Yeah, I have met you, but very nice to meet the...
when we say new member of the team, we didn't find him outside and brought him in. So before we jump into our topic, Keelan, why don't you just take a minute, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background, how you ended up on this couch talking to us.
Started off young age, got into obviously IT, went to uni, done cybersecurity, and ended up getting a contract job straight out of uni. Managed to smash that. Then went into another job, got it done all right there, and then ended up here now in Gardner Systems after 5 years experience now, to be fair, within the industry, and ended up here. And
you know what? And you're doing all right here as well. So that's good. And we've dragged you on a podcast, which is a new thing for you.
Yeah. Sure.
And I was talking there before about your background. You did cybersecurity as part of what you did at university, and some of your background's been that. So, so what have been some of your experiences? Where's your kind of focus been in this first 5 years of your career?
To be fair, I've took a lot of learning from university and went to Hack the Box and stuff. So it's obviously you don't just go on and sign up to it whenever it first came out. It was you actually had to go into the CSS codes behind the scenes and actually hack your way into being able to get an invitation. And that was quite an experience, to be fair.
I think we should do our events like that. Wow. Sounds great.
It's not really a standard process, but that's all changed now, to be fair. Whenever the competitors come out, try hack me. So it's changed the world with all that stuff. Not really sure.
And then from a kind of a work point of view as well, obviously you've had a couple of different roles. So what have been some of your focus areas there as well?
A lot of it's been infrastructure, to be fair. But in my last job, we did have ISO accreditations. So 27001 and stuff requires pen testing. So reading a lot of reports coming back from pen testers and making sure that everything's patched and up to scratch.
So like a pro, do you see there how he segued the whole show into talking about pen testing? So, well, let's do that. So, Wayne, you normally have some good starter for 10 questions on this kind of stuff. So, so pen testing, not new to you, but is relatively new to you. So,
it is new. We're doing more of it. We're being asked about it more. So naturally, I'm inquisitive. So I want to know more about it, So how would you describe pen testing? What is it?
Okay, well, that sounds like a good question.
Yeah.
Keelan, I don't know why I'm passing it over like you couldn't hear Wayne ask the question, but
the basics, to be fair, is just finding a vulnerability, isn't it? It's how can you think that you would find a way in? There's multiple different threat vectors, so it's finding that one and exploiting it. It may be brute forcing a password, or could be a mispatched server. It could be anything. It just depends on. There's multiple different ways of detecting it, and
is there different types of testing? And you were saying, well, you test a network, you do reconnaissance, and then you would build out from there. So would that include people? Would you pen test people? Is that a thing?
There is a social security, a social engineering aspect of it as well. It's coming back to that whole thing of act like you belong and you'll just get in there. There is that part of it as well. Got a good few mates that are pen testers as their job, and sometimes they'll have to go on site but no one will know they're coming on site, and they'll just pretend that they're supposed to be there.
Okay.
And then they'll just walk in.
Proper
and then,
threat actors.
So it's
Yeah.
And then obviously it's like, oh, can you just walk up to a port? Is there any hidden Ethernet ports or whatever that they can just go and plug into?
Wow.
What can they find whenever they go and just plug into that? But that's a completely different level. That's a big signature agreement to be able to sign one of those off.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting phrase. I mean, I've not heard that phrase before. Acts like you belong.
Yeah,
and I think that's because we talk quite a lot in security about this idea of assume breach. So this idea of assume the bad actor is already in, and that's kind of from, but because that's interesting from a people point of view, but you also get that from a technology point of view. And obviously it wouldn't be a technology podcast if we didn't at some point at least mention the phrase AI. But one of the things you hear a lot about now in the security industry is about how you are looking at technology to be able to spot these kind of anomalies in behavior and anomalies in activity. So one of the tools that's available to a cyber threat actor is make the anomalies seem like they're normal. So make the anomalies seem like they belong. And that's one of the things that you're looking at constantly, is that actually is the training that you're doing to your system that is likely to look for this kind of threat detection, who is looking for anomalies. Can you train that system to look at anomalies and then just treat them like they're not anomalies anymore, and then you can exploit them later? So I think that's a really interesting idea. And in terms of pen testing, one of the other areas that we see, and it's kind of almost like an adjacent technology to it, is this idea of looking for, pen testing is great to look for the things that almost about. So point them at the network, point them at a building, point them at an external infrastructure, because there's kind of two types, and you can do external and internal pen testing. So this idea of, well, here's my cloud IP address range or my public IP address range, go and test whatever services I've got on there. And then you've got kind of stuff Keelan's talking about, you come on prem, you work on site, you go, just go and tell me, go and look at these systems, or that kind of next level of just go and find that. But you've also got this kind of idea of vulnerability assessment. So, it's this idea of being able to, pen testing, I'll point you at something, but what about the things I don't know about? So you kind of seeing a growth in this kind of market as well, where organizations, so lots and lots of vendors with solutions out there that will do this kind of thing, either automated or you can get somebody to go and do it for you. But actually go and tell me the things that I don't know about. What are the other risks associated with my domain, with my business address, whatever it might be? And they'll just go outside and start looking for things that you don't even know are vulnerabilities right now, and looking at then can we exploit them to do something else.
You don't know you're vulnerable until it's found.
Yeah. Well, you don't know what you don't know. It's it's while we're throwing around good phrases that we like to use, but you don't know what you don't know.
Is pen testing for enterprise companies, SMEs, micro organizations? Should everyone be pen testing?
I think that's a really good question, and actually, I think Keelan kind of touched on something that was really useful earlier on, because you said, you're kind of that background of working with ISO, and actually part of ISO 27001, I guess, is the idea that you should be doing pen testing.
At least it's pretty much an annual commitment when you've got ISO like.
And I think there's probably a reality of pen testing, and I'm not saying that micro businesses shouldn't, but I think you'd have to be potentially a relatively special use case to want to be able to do that at that size, because you've got to have a look at, well, what am I testing and how much stuff, if you're a really small organization and everything's in Microsoft 365.
You haven't got an estate that's going to be vulnerable, you're not using anything that's going to be accessed in the cloud or whatever.
Is it part of Cyber Essentials framework, pen testing, or does that sit outside of it?
It's not part of, as far as we know, we were talking about this actually before we started recording, as far as we know, it's not part of the, and we'd have to go away and check, I'd have to look it up on the internet. But as far as we know, it's not part of the requirement for Cyber Essentials, but actually in terms of building process, it's something that you should be doing, whether that's once a year, twice a year. I mean, there's the idea of, we were talking about this before we started, wasn't we? This idea of kind of pen test as a service, where you're continually running these kind of tests and vulnerability assessments to say, where have I got issues? Because, IT does, it's a really interesting area, and it's probably a show in itself to talk about pen testing as a service, because I think it's an interesting
podcast, Paul.
Well, I think it's an interesting area, and I think there's some organizations who buy into that service and like that idea, and then there's other organizations that go, I don't want to be pen testing all the time.
So can I ask a question on pen testing as a service? Does that mean it's continuously live, or you implement it once a month?
What if my answer is no, you can't ask a question on pen testing as a service?
We can delete that out, Dylan.
It's okay. It's okay. Well, let's run with it. So it's a continual service. So often these are kind of SaaS services anyway. So they're so almost by definition, they're probably doing external testing.
Right, okay.
But these, you know, and you can see the potential in the market. And actually, I think if you're a company that's iterating, a lot of change, then you might want to be able to do some of that, you know, but you can take kind of pen testing to all kinds of levels as well. You know, the idea that, you know, Keelan was talking before about that idea of, oh, well, can I plug into a port on a wall and get access? But I mean, you can be going into things like, is there a vulnerability in that piece of code that I can exploit? You know, that's the kind of level. So this idea of, it's like most things when we talk cybersecurity, isn't it? It's like most things that there's offshoots of that then that become things in themselves. So things like application security testing. So can I look at an application itself and what's the security inside of that application? So, you know, but pen testing in general, you know, to probably just strip it back a little bit, pen testing in general is a thing Keelan described before, in that it is something that you point at either internally or externally, an infrastructure, and say, go test that, find vulnerabilities. Can you get through? We think it's secure. Can you prove otherwise? You know, and that might include things like you give them an account on the network so that they can be an insider threat.
Okay.
You know, so you can kind of test all those things. But I mean, maybe just to kind of wrap up, just as
one last question.
Oh, no, go on.
So what's the output of a pen test? Do you get a report then that talks about the vulnerabilities and recommendations? Is that what someone would have at the end of a pen test?
What's been your experience? Yeah, what kind of some of the outputs?
So normally what it would be is, so you'd obviously get the pen test organized. You give them an account. Maybe you have multiple different levels of the account. Could be a non-privileged, then a privileged. They obviously go away, do the reconnaissance, and then they come back and they give you like a vulnerability scan of what they've found. And then obviously the output of, well, you could be potentially vulnerable to this. But in a lot of the cases is they'll be like, well, we can see this. We've done it from the internal perspective, but it's not hitting the internet. So in those cases, it's not always prominent. But if someone got into the internal network, then it's the use case that they have to make you aware. So it's a lot of it is just big detailed reports and linking the CVEs and saying, well, this is a threat, this has been patched, but it's still prominent on your network, whereas you could have an old server that's running, say, 2012. If that's not patched, then you're vulnerable to it. Yeah. And it's making you aware of everything that's, you may not know it's there anymore, especially if companies are changing and people are coming and going, etc.
Yeah, and I think that's the ideal of kind of what you want. You know, the ideal is that you want to know what the risks are. So what have you discovered on my network? Or maybe you get a clean bill of health and great, well done you. But what those risks are, and importantly, actually, what you do about them. You know, I think it's okay having a pen tester come along and tell you that you've got some problems, but I don't want to know, I've just got some problems. Can you tell me what I do with those problems? You know, and it's another big cybersecurity challenge, isn't it? Is the idea that we get all of this information, all these metrics about potential threats. What people really want is, go deal with that for me. You know, which is where things like pen testing as a service maybe can be quite useful in terms of giving that continual assessment. But that idea of actually, tell me what the problem is, how do I go and fix it, and then actually test again. Have I fixed it?
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of the outcome you want. So maybe as we do it, so I'm going to try and wrap up this time without Wayne asking more questions. But as we look to wrap up now, so from your experience, you've done some work with pen testing. Is there any kind of tips that you would share with people in terms of, what they should think about, why they should be doing them, how often they should be doing them?
So a lot of it's just you're scanning. Scanning's like your most important tool. You don't know what you're going to see until you do a scan. Most people don't want to do it, but it's required. I would obviously advise pretty much annually, every 12 months. But that's from an ISO perspective. I've dealt with ISO for three and a bit years. So it's that's my standpoint on it, to be fair.
Yeah. But I think it's fair as well, actually, as an organisation, that pen testing should be something. If you want to improve your cybersecurity posture and be aware of a potential threat. Yeah. It's a tool in your bag of tools, isn't it? So
it's not like a massive commitment either. It may cost a rough couple of thousand is a rough ballpark, but it's the knowledge that you get from it and the protection you're going to get from the end of it, to be fair, because you're going to be able to have a knowledgeable standpoint of where you are and what you've got to do to protect yourself.
Well, Keelan, You know,
There
I
you go.
think that's been great. You know, I think there's some great takeaways. You know, we call it tech takeaways for a reason. So there's some tech takeaways. But Keelan, look, really appreciate your time. I know we kind of threw this on you to say, hey, you've got a job at Gardeners. Fancy coming on the podcast?
It's great to be on here, to be fair.
Oh, that's all right. And maybe we'll get you come back and do it again then.
Hey.
Now he said he's liked
here.
it. So there you go. We need a good bench of hosts. Mainly it means that I don't have to come and do it all the time so people get bored. Okay, you know I love it. Really. So look, Keelan, really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Keelan.
Wayne, great to have you back. Great to have you back on the show. So until next time, you know, if you've enjoyed this episode, then do click that kind of thumbs up thing that people like to click on YouTube or whatever, on the tubes. So please click that. But make sure you catch all future episodes of Tech Takeaways and do subscribe. You can subscribe here on YouTube. You can subscribe in all good homes of podcasts or even the bad ones, wherever you get your podcasts from. So until next time, thanks for watching Tech Takeaways.